Well, I call that a lot of fanfare. Well done. And thank you very, very much. This morning, I'm not going to quote from any illustrious authors because I want to tie my subject to personal experiences. Over the last time of over 60 years, I've had the opportunity to watch thousands of persons going out in a great crusade in search of truth. They almost remind me a little of the medieval crusades, in which persons in every walk of life, every degree of intelligence, set out on that great pilgrimage from Europe to Jerusalem. Many got only a short distance and gave up. Others kept on to die in the desert. Still others fought their way through the ranks of the Saracens and either died there or gradually returned to their own lands. A fraction came back. They were all seeking the holy city, the city of their faith. And in spite of every effort for centuries, Christendom was never able to recapture that city. And in a way, this reminds me of the struggle of people today. In every religion, every faith, every cult, and every creed, human beings are searching for the personal experience of reality. They are seeking to come to understand themselves, to find a reason for their own existence, to find that balm of Gilead which has been promised to them. They have come in every color, creed, race, and type, and every degree of intelligence. And yet, with it all, so very few have reached the goal that they sought. Many reached a goal which they thought was what they sought. But after a time it proved elusive and delusionary, and the search continued. The alchemists sought to make gold, and also to reform society. The Hermetists studied the secrets of nature. The Greek mystics and philosophers studied the world with the most profound attention and with the greatest benevolence. Many of them came to extraordinary conclusions, but now in the 20th century, these conclusions are ranged against each other, and a new materialism, a new intellectualism has taken over, and a new pilgrimage has been declared, a pilgrimage into the great economic future of a world industrial wealth. Still, the search goes on, the search for peace among nations, peace in our own hearts, peace in our family lives, peace in our national governments. We are still searching for that mysterious integrity which alone can bind up the errors of society. Now, looking back as far as we can in history on this, we observe a certain number of special points of interest, and these include both Eastern and Western thinking, the wisdom of Asia and the wisdom of the Western world combined. And it all seems to sum up in one peculiar inconsistency, namely that the individual seeks something better without becoming better himself. He seems to think of religion as a way of atoning for something, atoning for his own misdeeds or his own ignorance. He seems to believe that if he can become part of an association of religious peoples, that he can drift with them into the better land beyond. But actually, we are today no closer to that which we essentially seek than we were thousands of years ago, because we have added more to our difficulties than we have to our solutions. And now we all stand in the midst of the greatest challenge we've ever known, nuclear warfare. Now, how all of the good of the past could come to this, how the love and wisdom of thousands of dedicated souls could not prevent this emergency, is a very strange and sad commentary on our way of life. So this morning we want to take up the problem of opening the doors to the inner self, to the reality within us, to see if we can come to a little better understanding of the problems that we face. Those of you who have in travel visited primitive peoples may note one interesting point, namely, way back in the beginning of time, there were those who had visions. There were those who had strange beliefs, but these beliefs were supported by extrasensory perceptions. And in those old days, the great scriptures of the world were written. In those days, the great philosophical and scientific footings were laid down. And we have only inherited the skill to make certain improvements upon original revelations. Therefore, the great period of revelation is not now. The great period of revelation gave the world Pythagoras and Akhenaton and Moses, Zoroaster, Buddha, Krishna, all the great scholars and wisdom teachers of the past. Now, why was that the way it is? Why were those days better for the development of wisdom than ours? I think probably the answer to this is reasonably evident, namely an uncluttered existence. Our ancestors did not have the great ambitions that we have. Even our forebears in this country had no such vast ambitions as we are courting today. In those days, people lived close to nature, which was a great advantage. They lived in a simple natural environment that had not been spoiled completely. True, they lived in company with some unpleasant animals and things of this nature, and quite early began to develop feuds among themselves. But generally speaking, primitive man lived in a natural world. And living in a natural world, when he tried to create a philosophy of life with very limited resources with which to work, and not really any understanding that there was a philosophy of life, he began to build his way of living by studying the life of the world around him. There is an account, I don't know whether it's completely factual or traditional, to the effect that speech came from nature. That long before the individual was able to have words or created alphabets, he copied natural sounds. And having the proper structure in the throat to do so, he was able to imitate the sound of a waterfall, or a wind through trees, or the cries of birds and animals. And this seemingly was the beginning of language. He found it possible to tell his neighbor or communicate certain ideas, feelings, impulses by accepting the sounds of the natural world. He knew sounds that frightened him and sounds that pleased him. He knew sounds of birth and sounds of death. And from all these he began to develop a series of sounds which became gradually letters of a primitive alphabet. But these sounds came definitely from the natural world. So did everything else he had. He had to come to the conclusion that if he was ever going to understand the invisible, he must be able to find it in the visible. Almost all old theologies are merely abstractions of natural phenomena. The gods were the powerful chieftains. All of the rules and laws attributed to deities were the result of human relationships testing the possibility of community existence. So little by little, we built a world in which nature provided the only available facts. These facts could be, by careful meditation perhaps, or constant reinvestigation, could become truths. And this, in a sense, is the beginning of modern science in 17th century Europe. Namely, that there were truths that could be built upon facts. That these facts could become the basis of rules. That these facts, by constant repetition and investigation, showed nature's way in a great many directions. It made it possible to decide internally, to a measure at least, what nature expected us to do. On the basis of nature would penalize anything that was not within its own approval. So little by little, the science of nature began to take the form of a natural philosophy. A natural philosophy that was based upon the seasons, upon the climates, upon the various nature phenomena, from everything from the gently flowing stream to the volcanic eruption. All these things had to be fitted into something supported by facts. And facts were things that you could see, that you could touch, or you could in some way have a direct contact. Now, from facts, the problem of truths resulted in morality. Morality was really the moral interpretation of facts. It was a fact made alive and vivid through experience. The individual taking the fact and working with it discovered finally that it had within itself a meaning, a moral value, that it produced good consequences, that it advanced causes, whereas error nearly always destroyed. So little by little the truth factor came in. And after a long time with truth, the mind and consciousness began to ascend to a higher level, and this was reality. Reality is, in a sense, the higher octave of truth. It is something that is gradually built into our understanding as a complicated network of truths, working together, and through their interaction producing what we call reality. Reality is the final proof of the truth of a fact. And on this basis, we have built most of the learning that we know today. Now, it also follows that from the beginning of time, individuals in a mysterious way began to question themselves. The caveman probably was among the first to ask why he was created in the first place. The answer has not yet been found. Most people haven't the slightest idea where they're here. They have no idea where they came from, except biologically, and nowhere near any more from where they're going, except in terms of the mortuary. All of the rest is a noble internal reaction to something. The individual was not willing to accept the fact alone. He had to build it into a moral value which became his truth, and he finally had to accept it and live it and grow because of it, and that way contact reality. So we're going to now question how the people of today or of long ago continued their search for reality. And what did they use to open the doors between the visible and the invisible? How did they expect to attain a concrete, visual, audible reality? Well, in the earliest days that we know of, there were in all tribes and nations certain mystics. And these mystics were persons who were given to strange dreams, visions, curious experiences, which did not limit their consciousness entirely to the common world. Somewhere along the line, dreams became a part of man's structure of searching. A dream had certain technical advantages.